Shemai everyone, welcome back to the Athlete Climate Academy. I'm Hugh James, and today's guest I've wanted to get on for an awful long time, so we've known each other a long time. We've got Rachael Crewesmith, who's a mountaineering instructor, mountain bike guide coach, and just an absolutely wonderful presenter. Rachael, welcome to the ACA.
Thanks very much, Hugh. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about your background and your rise through the ranks and your rise to greatness.
Oh, I don't know about greatness. So I'm a recently qualified winter mountaineering climbing instructor. And when I say recently, I mean I've been doing this job for 15 years, but I've just finished the last one in the chain, which means I can take people winter climbing and mountaineering. So I think we met
but
when
also,
I was
as well as the mountaineering mountain bike coach, you do kind of do it all.
Yeah, well, we met when I was a lowly climbing wall instructor, didn't we? And I was just hoovering behind the walls at Boulders in Cardiff, which was quite a while ago now, 2008. I think I started working there. So I work full time in the mountains. Most of the time with mountaineering and climbing at the moment, but some years there's more mountain biking, so it kind of depends. And I can get in a boat and do some canoeing if I need to, and stand-up paddleboarding and things like that. And some running as well. I do a bit of running guiding, which is fun.
And that's what I mean, like when I say your rise to greatness, because I've seen you on that trajectory, and honestly, you're in my top 5 people that I would trust in the mountains. Like I've got one of my mentors down here that I've known since I was like 13, and my mate Danny and a few others. But like you are genuinely, the word I think is bomber for being in the mountains. So it's not really any surprise to me that you did pass your winter mountaineering and climbing instructor qualification. But I noticed on your Instagram you said you were the 44th woman to get the qualification, and it makes up just 6% of those who make up that qualification, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I'm actually 45th. We did a bit of new math. Someone popped up and said, I was number 40, so we did the count back. And then since then, another lady called Georgina has qualified just 2 weeks after me, so she's 46. But we're still only 6% of the overall total of people who've ever passed. I don't know what the percentage is of people that are currently active in winter, because I know there's only about 10 women that worked this winter, for example, in Scotland. But it's pretty small.
Do you find that kind of percentage, I imagine, is indicative, or might not be, of summer mountaineering, of mountain bike guides? What's the percentages across? You have to give me actual numbers, but the percentages kind of like across the board in your experience.
I think I don't want to say it's the higher tiers because I don't want it to be a hierarchy, but sort of at the more technical end of the spectrum, there's definitely less women. So it's 6% for us, and in the summer it's about 10%. Winter Mountain Leader is 10%, and then it goes up to about 35%, where sort of with the Climbing Wall Award and the climbing rock climbing instructor, which is the outside version. So it's a bit higher with those awards. And no one really knows why. Why is there a drop off? Why aren't people going further? And there's lots of different initiatives at the moment to try and tackle that, and if only to just show people that it's an option and show them that there is a route for you if you want to go all the way to the more technical end. I feel like sometimes
initiatives.
Oh, sorry. I feel like sometimes the reason why people don't get to winter mountaineering climbing instructor, firstly, it's kind of awful walking about in the gross weather, so maybe people are more sensible. But also the time that you've got all the experience and all of the necessary logbook to do even the training, you're usually in your 30s. And if you're a woman in your 30s, then there's other things, maybe you've got other career plans or family plans, or maybe you want to have a family, and this job isn't particularly conducive with family life, because it's big, long days, long hours, dangerous conditions, and it's hard.
Yeah, and give us a your journey to this qualification, then, what are the things that you need to check off along the way for listeners who might not have done these kind of qualifications? I imagine it's not an easy journey.
So you've got to do your summer mountain leader, which is where you have to take people hill walking in the UK. And for that, you have to do 40 days of walking minimum for the logbook, attend a 6-day training course, 5-day assessment with lots of camping and looking after people. So you have to have that as the basics. Then you need to do your mountaineering climbing instructor, which is multi-pitch rock climbing. The grade is VS, which is attainable, I think, for everybody, but it's a respectable grade. And then you've got to work as a mountaineering climbing instructor for a time. Then, if you want to go down the winter route, you need to do your winter mountain leader. So that's another 40 days of walking in winter conditions. And the assessment is sort of famously full of navigation, night navigation, whiteout navigation, difficult conditions, avalanche. You have to be knowledgeable about that. And you have to work after each of these awards for a certain amount of time. After you've ticked all that off, and then you've done a bit of winter climbing as well, then you can do the training for the WMCI. So that's the grade actually is grade 3. So again, that's pretty achievable. But you're sort of expected to be able to climb grade 3 in any conditions. And anyone that climbs in winter knows that grade 3 means all sorts of things, just like grade 4 means all sorts of things. And then, the training course is 5 days and the assessment is 4 days.
That does seem to be a lot of time and effort to get to that place. But I suppose then as a guide, as a mountain leader, you are responsible for people in the mountains. It's why I say, like, you're one of the most trustworthy people I know, because having gone through all that, done all those qualifications and worked in the mountains for so long, it's not just like popping to the mountains every now and then and having a good weekend and then coming back again. It's like genuinely spending time in the mountains, knowing the conditions, year in, year out. You've been doing it a long time now, right?
Yeah, I suppose you have to live and breathe it a bit. I have great respect for anybody that comes from, say, the south of England or from a city and comes and does their, particularly winter mountain leader, because I think it's really difficult if you're not in the environment all the time, living in the area and breathing it with everybody you talk to. I've been really boring this year, and all I talk about is what routes are in, what the snow's like, what's here, what's there, how long the walk is. Are you wearing trainers or boots? I don't know. I think I've been quite boring, but it achieved the goal.
But that's the kind of thing that on this podcast people really love. But and again, that's one of the reasons why we spoke recently on social media about an interaction that you posted to your social media feed, and it was from a person who suggested that with your new qualification, they were like, "Oh, did they lower the standards to get through?" And I don't think that was a drive at you. It's about women in general, and it infuriates me. And you were really good about it, like. About laughing it off, as I suppose you have to. But every time someone like you shares that interaction, those kind of interactions, which I'm assuming you get a lot, like, it's very educational for me, a little bit shocking, but it kind of astounds me the regularity of those kind of comments.
Actually, I don't get them loads. And generally from within the industry, you never hear that. When I passed, I couldn't move anywhere for congratulations from my peers on the hill. And my peers on the hill are mostly men. People coming down number 4 gully the following week with 2 clients. "Hi, Rach! Congratulations! By the bottom, the 2 clients said, "We should have just had an archway of axes for you to walk under," because they couldn't believe, how encouraging and excited everybody was. But there are occasional jibes, and they tend to come from out with the industry. Things like, so this particular one said, "I hope they didn't lower the standard for the sake of inclusion," because that's becoming a trend these days. And I thought, well, probably not if only 45 people have passed, 45 women. So they probably haven't lowered it. But rather than reply, I just thought, I'll let someone else reply. And luckily, the industry came to my aid and said, no, it's absolutely insulting that you could possibly say that. But it is a common thing, you know. And someone else once said to me, "Oh well, you just got in through the back door for that opportunity because you're a woman," and it's sort of still there within, you know, this sort of misogynistic discourse. But I want to defend the great men in our industry that don't think like that and are unbelievably supportive and helpful. But yeah, unfortunately, it's still a case. And you know, I'm a woman, but I'm still a white woman, middle class woman, and I've had all the privileges that the men have had, really, apart from my gender. And I think there's other diverse groups of people who are facing a lot more of that backlash.
Yeah, and it's a different one. Like, I remember it was on a TV show, a really popular TV show here in the UK. A guy was talking about the barriers to people from diverse backgrounds getting into the mountains. And I remember all the stuff on social media of like, there's no barriers. Like, you can go and walk in the mountains whenever you want. And I think that people misunderstood barriers as like maybe a physical barrier for like, of which there's still a few of those too, but the systemic barriers that are still there from stopping people from getting into the outdoors. And it is, you know, I take my fair share of people into the mountains, and just doing small mountains or just doing like a wild camp here and there, it's surprising for people, like you mentioned, from cities and the likes, who've maybe never camped or maybe never gone up. I took two of my friends from Florida at Pen y Fan, which is it's the highest mountain in South Wales near me, and they were blown away. One of the guys said it was the best day of his life, and it's a mountain that I go up regularly, like once a week normally. Run to the top, run back down to the car, and then I go home. But for this one guy, it was the best day of his life. So I think that there's still, I imagine there's so many barriers still to break down, but it's worth that continued effort. And one of the reasons why I really want to talk to you about this kind of stuff is because you were really good at being an advocate for women in the mountains. And we talked about this, about how sometimes it's tiring to constantly educate people, to constantly stand up for others in the industry that are like you. I get it from the climate side quite a lot of like, right, okay, this is something I need to explain now. But it can be quite exhausting, but you seem to take it in your stride and be just a really great advocate for women in the outdoors, and women in all kind of sectors, really. And doing it all with a massive smile on your face, which you've got a reputation for now.
Well, a friend of mine once said, I remember complaining to a friend when I was starting out that I didn't have any role models, and there weren't any role models for me. And he just said, he was quite young, but he was very insightful, and said, "Why don't you just be a role model, Rich?" And I sort of went, "Oh, okay, and it's, you know, it's not very British, is it? And it's very uncomfortable to think, well, I could be that person. But I kind of embraced it, and from then everything got better, because everything I did then, I did with this idea that someone else was watching me, so do it well. And it's worked, because you can be a role model to someone. You don't have to be at the very top of the tree to be a role model. I call them stepping stone role models, but a psychologist told me they were called proximal role models. So it's where somebody is a role model to you because perhaps they're just at the next stage. Maybe, you know, they've just qualified. Like, I've just qualified as a WMCI. My friend Kirsty has just done the training, so I can be her proximal role model. And once you start to embrace that, I think you feel a bit less uncomfortable about it and just get on with it. Yeah, some other friends who said, "Oh, I'm a bit embarrassed about, you know, people recognising me." I said, "Well, it's tough. It's tough luck. They're going to recognise you, so just embrace it and be good at it." And so now when I meet people on the hill, I say, "Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, thanks for following me on Instagram, and that's really great. What have you been doing today?" You know, do it that way instead. Yeah, I enjoy it, actually. It's fun.
Well, you do it really, really well. And one of the things that I know you work at every year that I don't think gets enough publicity, but maybe that's not the point of it, is Women's Trad Fest. Tell us a little bit about that and like how fun it is to work at.
So the Women's Trad Festival started out as just a way of introducing women to trad climbing, traditional climbing, which is climbing without bolts, so placing traditional place protection, taking it out afterwards, which I think can feel like a bit of a dark art if you don't have any access to it. It's expensive to get into because you have to buy all that stuff, and you can only do it in certain places. And there's also all these ethics, aren't there? British ethics that are absolutely baffling for anybody else to try and work out. Why you can put a cam there and you can't wear trainers there, and don't even start on winter. That's a totally different set of ethics. So this festival was set up as just a gazebo in a field, but it grew arms and legs. In the third year, it sold out faster than Glastonbury, which was a big boasting point for us. And the idea is that 2 novices get paired with 1 experienced climber, and they go climbing for the day, just like you would do if you were doing a traditional apprenticeship to learn to climb. After a few years of that, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we realised that we couldn't maybe get insurance anymore for a festival that's so high profile, so big, without kind of formalising it a little bit. So the Association of Mountaineering Instructors teamed up with the Women's Trad Festival, and now we have this tiered system where we have learners, so they're novice climbers. They're looked after by 1 leader, and the leader has to be a qualified rock climbing instructor, so that's that first tier of qualification. And then 3 or 4 leaders will be under the mentorship of a professional mountaineering instructor like myself. And they're not there to supervise, they're not there to be in the way, they're not there to dictate, but they're just there to be this proximal role model for a start, and also to just give advice, because often these leaders are teaching people to climb, but maybe they haven't done loads of teaching trad climbing with the qualification that they've got, so the mountaineering instructors are there to sort of give advice and help. And it's brilliant because we have the most female mountaineering instructors working in one place. We also, it means that the leaders maybe get to meet a female mountaineering instructor. I'd never met one before, for about 7 years in this industry. I just thought that my amazing boss, Nick, was the only, you had to be as good as Nick to do that job. And it was unattainable to me. He was too high up on the pedestal. So that's a really good thing. And the other thing that is really important to me, so we're showcasing the industry, and we're showcasing the pathway through to the more technical awards, but we also employ men in those positions, and I'm really keen on that because I think women can close themselves off a bit if they think that only a female instructor can make them facilitate a good time. Whereas if you have a male, there's great male instructors, they can be brilliant, they can be sympathetic, and all the things that you need, that you don't have to have a woman. Because there's only 100, say there's only 10%, you're suddenly making your pool of people you can employ very small, aren't you? So that's what's great about it. It's also a totally sustainable festival. Everybody's asked to bring their own cup, their own plate, their own glass, come and camp, take public transport. There's no tat given out. And then there's a few brands that have supported us for a long time. And it's absolutely brilliant. It's brilliant. I head up the team now of the mountaineering instructors, and so I work really closely with the 4 directors, and it's an amazing event.
It sounds pretty incredible for a load of reasons, but I completely get what you mean, that it's a lot of sports in the outdoors that are just, unless you know someone, like I was really lucky that when I wanted to get into climbing, I knew someone who was a climber, and they were like, come with me, Maka, I'll go and, we'll go and do some stuff. When I wanted to get into winter mountaineering, we went ice climbing. I just had a call saying, we're going ice climbing 4 a.m. This was in close to me when we used to get cold winters here. And I remember being in a really small Helly Hansen waterproof with a pair of motorbiking gloves on. I might even had like a biking helmet or something, and like pottering around. I had a pair of HB Tornadoes that are in the background, people watching on video, from a mate of mine, and we went. And I just can't fathom how I would have ever got into it without having that person, that role model who's still there for me today. But same with traditional climbing. Like, how do you get into it unless you know that person? I think that's what Women's Trad Fest does really well. Is it just connects so many people across all of the UK.
Yeah, definitely the connection thing. We encourage people who, if you've already, so say my friends who live in Llanberis, they say, can I come? I'm like, no, it's not for you. Because we encourage people to come if they don't have any connections. Exactly. So, you know me, and you've got 20 people in your network who trad climb, and that you can walk to the trad climbing, so it's not for you. So, yeah, it's all about those connections and hopefully giving people an opportunity to do something that would otherwise be, would feel, that we talk about barriers. Oh, the mountain doesn't discriminate. Well, getting over that barrier into trad is the difficulty, isn't it? And once you're there, once you've had a go, you've put your hands on the rock, you've put some cams in a crack, you go, okay, now I know what I need to learn.
Yeah, and having that every year. I love the fact you say, like, it's not for you, because it does feel like sometimes with these kind of events, I imagine some people can feel like, oh, I'm being left out of that. And, as it is nice sometimes to be like, oh, that's not for me. That's for someone else. And that's absolutely okay that it's not for me. I like the fact that, we have those kind of events for everyone.
People are funny about that, though, and we get occasional, what about a man's trad fest? And I'm like, well, there's loads of man's trad fests, and if you want to organise one, just organise one yourself. Like, it's, we can't do everything. We're not volunteers, but we give a lot of time and energy into that festival. So this is who it's for. And if you want to do a festival, then that's who that's for. It's the same, there's a really great initiative called the Young Alpinist Group, headed up by Tom Livingston, and he does that voluntarily. And people say, "Oh, that's elitist." I say, "Well, it's not for you. It's he wants it to be elitist because he wants to produce the next generation of elite alpinists. So that's fine. I think that's fine."
I think it is too, and I think that's whether we're talking about equality or climate, like sometimes it just has to be fine. And I'm trying my best not to get triggered by stuff as much anymore on social media. I think that's something we definitely need to do a whole podcast on, is like how to not be triggered by stuff on the internet. And it's really difficult to not be triggered by it. But in terms of climate then, what are the things that you think we're overlooking when it comes to, I don't know, those kind of festivals, mountain sports in general? You spend a lot of your time in the mountains. What could we be doing better within the industry? Because I think you speak to a good part of the industry that I think does get overlooked from time to time. It's like the grassroots. It's where mountaineers and alpinists and outdoorsy people come from, is through people like you. What could we be doing better? Or are we doing as much as we can?
It's tricky, isn't it? You could, we could point the finger back on ourselves and say, we need to be better. We could do lots of, and we could share lifts more. We could take the bus more. The reality is the bus services in rural mountainous areas aren't good enough. So it's really difficult to, on top of everything else that you're trying to do that day, also take public transport. For example, there's, there's an electric bus in Ogwen, which is an amazing initiative in North Wales, near where I live. But the first bus isn't until 9:40, and the last bus is at 4:40, something like that. So that, that's difficult because it's not quite early enough and it's finished quite late enough. So there is a bus service out with that, but they've got an electric bus, so they're doing the best that they can. They've only got limited staff, but we need those. So we can get, I think, a bit bogged down in trying to do all those things. I actually think what we could do better is vote, is pressure our local MPs, and is put your money where it's important. So I took all my savings out of and put it into an ethical bank, and I feel like that's a pretty good thing to do. I moved my pension as well into an ethical bank, and I feel like they're the big things that we could do that actually are quite well, rather than just worrying about straws or recycling. it's the big things you can do with your money that are going to make the difference.
Yeah, I mean, I was chatting to one of the mountaineering instructors up there in Eryri as well, up in North Wales, and we chatted about he was really concerned with people driving to him to then go on a day in the mountains and then drive home again, wherever that was from. And we talked about if that's actually the biggest problem, and we talked about that within just my local city, around 80,000 people, don't hold me to that number, but around 80,000 people commute in by car every day or a lot of them by car, into that city and then back again. And that's 5 days a week. So going to the mountains then on a weekend, if people drive there, especially if because it is quite difficult with rural transport, is that the biggest problem? And we can always do better, and we should be striving to do better as well. But let's not let the small things distract from the big things. And I'm kind of blown away that you have a pension. Like, are we at that age yet? We are, of course. I'm gonna have to get a pension soon. Don't
you remember that advert? It said, like, at 21 you think it's too soon, at 31 you think it can wait, at 41 it's too late. It was some Scottish Widows advert. Yeah, yeah, you need one, Hugh.
Oh, really?
You need...
Get a pension and get it in a fossil fuel free one, if you can.
Well, that's it.
So
yeah.
what's the future?
Things that invest. Sorry, go on. Things that invest in green things.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the future hold for you? Are you going to be doing more qualifications, bigger trips, more of the same, dining back? What do you think the future is going to be looking like for you?
To be honest, I have been completely unable to focus on anything past the 24th of February, which was when this assessment finished. So my diary for the year is quite empty. Don't tell everyone that, actually. I want some holidays. I don't know. I haven't been on any big trips since before COVID. So maybe I need to go and do something, go on an adventure. I don't know. I think I just want to I think I've been working towards this final step for such a long time that I'd really just like to use it. So I'm going to take a year of that, and there's a bit of family things, and looking after my family and my mum. So I think I'm going to do that. I know it's not very rad, but that's the stuff that's important to me. And then just ticking over a few little projects, a few diversity projects I've got going on, and working on things like the Women's Trad Fest.
Because
not very
those kind of things
crazy.
are, and no, but I know that you say, "Oh, sorry, rad," or not very, very crazy. But that is, I think that's where I'd like to see the future of mountaineering and stuff in the mountains go to. Is like we need a more, I don't know, not. I'm trying to say that it's more real, it's more tangible. There's less push to do bigger stuff and travel more and all that kind of thing, because you can do so much just from where you live. You can be content. I think content is the word I'm looking for in the mountains. If you've got enough to explore and enough people to connect with, I feel like that's where I want to see my mountaineering and life go to, is a little bit more of just being happy and content in the mountains.
Oh, definitely. That's my, that's Snowdonia is my home. And when you said, what are you going to do? I was thinking of all these routes I wanted to climb that are within 10 minutes of where I live. And, I'm fortunate that I can do that, and not everybody can do that. But, local things, sort of UK-based adventures is what I'm really interested in this year. And, being content and doing stuff with my friends. And it's not about tick, 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 tick. People keep saying, what are you going to do next? Are you going to be a guide? Or, and I just think, well, no, I'm going to enjoy my achievement.
Absolutely, as you should. So for listeners who want to go off now and look up things like Women's Trad Fest, along the way, we hear about some great women's organisations that champion women in the outdoors. But what are some good kind of tangible brands, organisations, and the likes that have helped you along your way?
Well, a women's Tradfest is obviously one to go and look for. There's a fallow year this year, so we're not running a festival this time. But another organisation I've been involved with for a few years is the Women's Alpine Adventure Club, which is a CIC, community interest company, set up by my friend Jenny Dart, who's a mountaineering instructor. And their aim is to just upskill women to be able to go out in the alpine environment. So they run weeks and weekends out in the Alps and in the Dolomites. And then they also do British-based weekends and courses. So we just recently had the Scottish winter weekend. So teaching people to go out in Scottish winter, whether that's winter skills or a winter walking journey or introduction to winter climbing, advanced winter climbing, all these things. And it was all staffed by female staff. And there's a couple of weekends going on in the summertime, and then there'll be an alpine one as well. So that's worth a look. They've got a Facebook page. And then the other thing that I've been involved with, actually, so Mountain Training, which is the national governing body of our awards for mountaineering in the UK, have a Facebook page called Women in Mountain Training. And last year, we did a conference called the Women in Mountain Training Conference. And it was a 2-day conference where people could all come together, and you could be any qualification, any award, and there was no hierarchy. I was the host. I love hosting stuff like that. So I just introduced myself as I'm Rachel and I'm an instructor, because there's no hierarchy. And some people had just registered for awards in order to be able to come. So they didn't have any qualifications. And it was just such a great networking opportunity, that whole proximal role models thing. It just meant people were talking about kit, they were talking about nutrition, they were talking about barriers, they were talking about body types, women and girls. It was a really great conference. So I think we're going to do that every 2 years. So that's always worth a little look. And joining the Women in Mountain Training Facebook page, which is just full of really insightful and supportive chat, I think. But there's other cool things going on. So I think diversity probably starts with gender and starts with women, but it definitely doesn't end there. That's, there's more women than there are people of colour walking about in the mountains at the moment. So there's really great groups like Everybody Outdoors, which is encouraging people of all body types to come into the outdoors. There's Black Girls Hike. Out in the US, there's a group called Disabled Hikers. They're on Instagram, which I really like following. Disability Snow Sports UK, there's loads of cool initiatives like that to encourage people to get out into the mountains who maybe don't currently see themselves in any media.
And I think that's so important, because the route to tackle the climate crisis starts, I think, with climate justice, and a lot of those barriers need to fall before we can start to get there. So I think that's super important. Rach, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure. I really hope we get to do some fun stuff in the mountains together soon.
Yeah, I hope so. Thanks so much for having me, Hugh. And remember that people can't love the outdoors if they don't know about the outdoors. So that's your climate message, isn't it?
Absolutely. Diolch yn fawr iawn. Cheers, Rach.